And welcome back to the channel. So we're continuing on with this tutorial of building an interactive crime map with Leaflet.js and the Police UK API. And what we're going to do today is expand upon our previous tutorial by displaying all of the information from the API endpoint in our map. We'll include some custom emojis to represent the crime category, display the emoji where the crime took place on the map, color code each category, and then finally add some interactivity on the map to allow users to click on an emoji to find out the details of the crime in that location. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so the very first thing we need to do here now is to remove the previous JavaScript code we've created, because we will not need that now. We'll be creating things fresh. So let's remove that now. And with this clean slate, now we can go ahead and download our Leaflet.js library. Now, if you're using this code to build a website that is production ready, I probably would have it self-hosted, but for this tutorial, I'm just going to use a CDN. So I'll type in Leaflet.js API, and I'm going to use this on package website, which is here now. And first, I'm going to copy the CSS and then click view raw, and then just copy this URL here and pop it into my head area. So I'll say link, and the rel is style sheet, which I think stands for relation. Type is text/CSS. And the final value here will be the location of the file. So href is the copied value. So that is the Leaflet CSS file included. Now let's include the JavaScript file. So back to this website here. And I think what we need is the Leaflet.js URL here. So if I scroll down and click on Leaflet.js, have a little look-see. There we go. That looks good. 1.94. And then we'll copy this URL now. Right, so we'll add this here as a script tag, and we'll say script src and then the value, just like that. And this will be added at the bottom of the page, so just before the closing body tag. So we've essentially got our Leaflet.js library installed there and our styles. So now let's add in our own main.js file here. And same as above, I'll say script src, but I'll point to main.js instead of Leaflet.js. Okay, so then up here, we just need to include our own style.css file. So I'll just copy the above style sheet and then change the value to style.css. And inside of our style sheet, we're just removing the margins and paddings from all of our elements, making the page 100% in height, and then just setting the font family to Arial. Now, back into index.html, and I think it's time to actually begin creating this map area. So just below body, we're going to say div, and we're going to say the ID is fe-crime-map. And this div will hold our map as you might expect. Now, before we start coding up our map with our JavaScript, we do need to go into our style sheet and we need to give this map a height and a width. So here is our fe-crime-map ID, and we'll just say, well, first of all, we'll give it a border of 2 pixels solid red just to see what's going on. Width and height will be 100%. And if we have a little glance in the browser now, we can see the red border. So the height and width are correct. I can remove this border now. Okay, I think we can pop into our main.js file. And on line 1, the very first thing we're going to do is to wrap everything in a private scope. So we're not polluting the global space with our variable names and functions and everything like that. And I think this type of function is called an IIFE, or an immediately invoked function expression. So there you go. And the very last thing we need to do here is to add some parentheses followed by a semicolon. So all of our code inside will execute when the script loads. And now onto the fun stuff. So trying to be a bit prudent here, there are a few values that we have to configure. So I'm going to create a config object, and this will basically contain all of our application settings in one handy little area. And I'm going to declare this variable name as config. So const config, and it's going to be an object. And our very first property is going to be the initial map center location, which is Greenwich Park. So I'm going to call this initial map center. And the value here is going to be an array. So I'll just say square brackets. I'll continue creating these variables and come back and fill them in a little bit. Right, so the second property is going to be called initial zoom level. And this sets the initial zoom level. The scale goes from, I think it's 0, which basically is like seeing the Earth from space, all the way up to 18 or 19. You're basically sitting on someone's roof if you go that far. Zoom level 14 is perfect for seeing streets and neighborhoods, ideal for this crime map. The next property is going to be called map tile URL. So this URL basically tells Leaflet.js where to grab the actual map tiles from. And again, we will be filling this in a little bit later, but just to let you know, we will be using the tiles from OpenStreetMap. And this next property is in relation to OpenStreetMap also. It's going to be called map attribution. And this is legally required, so we basically just need to credit OpenStreetMap for the use of their tiles. Right, next property is called map element ID. So this basically points to the HTML element where the map should render, which is fe crime map. So the next one is initial month. And this is going to be the default month we'll load the crime data from. And I'm simply just going to say 2024 and the 5th month, which is May. Okay, great. Now we're actually on the last option here, which is the API base URL. And while we've still got the page open on the police website, let's go ahead and copy this URL here. So grab all of this here up until all crime, and we'll paste this in here now. So that is the guts of our configuration object. Now we can go ahead and fill in these values here. So we already know the map element ID, which is fe crime map. Yep, that's correct. Map attribution, I think I'm going to get this in a little bit. First up, I'd like to get the initial map center of Greenwich Park. So we can do that now. We'll go back into Google Maps, search for Greenwich Park again, and then get the coordinates from this pin here. And then we can paste them into our array, separated by a comma. Okay, nearly there. So the last two options we need to fill in are the map tile URL and the map attribution for OpenStreetMap. So into the Leaflet.js website I go. And in this Leaflet quick start guide, we can scroll down a bit, and here is the tile URL we need to copy. So there it is there. Tile.openstreet.map, and then we've got zxy.png. So we'll copy this, paste this in here, just like that. And then we can copy the attribution that we need as well. Okay, perfect. And we can close down that tab there, I think. Right, okay. So next up, we'll define a global crime map object so we can safely expose just the part of the code that we want to interact with. In this case, we're going to create an init function or method to kind of kick off our app. So inside here, we'll say console.log. We'll say config created. And we have a little syntax error. What is that? Curly brace. What is wrong there? Oh, okay, there we go. Fixed. Cool. So that's created there now. Now we have to go back into our HTML file. And now we actually have to run the code. So we're going to create a new script tag just below main.js. And we're going to hook into the window.onload event. So basically saying once everything's kind of loaded, like HTML and images and stuff like that, then we can run our crime map function. So in here, we're going to say crime map.init. Just like that. Yep. And now we can see our console.log message saying config created. So everything is up and running, working quite well. Yeah, quite happy at this moment. No errors yet. Okay, so let's move on to the next part. And that part is going to be creating custom icons or markers for the crime categories. So there's about 14 categories, and each one of those categories will have a custom marker, or in this case, it's actually going to be an emoji. So really quickly, we're going to go back into the API endpoint in our browser to see some of these crime categories. So here we are here. Now let's have a look here. The first one is antisocial behavior. And if we scroll down further, we can see more like other theft. What else have we got here? We got public order and so on and so forth. So now we'll create a little area just below our configuration object for these custom icons. And I'll declare this variable here. I'll say const icons. It's going to be an object, so curly braces here. And then inside, we'll create the first icon. And the very first icon is going to be a violent crime. So one of the harsher ones here, which will be illustrated with, I think, a fist. So let's find out exactly what it's called in the endpoint. Where is it? There it is there. Okay, violent-crime. So let us pop that in here for the name, and then we'll give it a value of a little fist here. And that is our first crime category emoji created there. And I'm just going to fast forward this bit here. I'm going to create the rest of the icons in the background and then, like magic, make them appear now. And if we zoom in a little bit closer, we can see all of our emojis. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Drugs is a drugs emoji. Antisocial behavior is a warning symbol. Criminal damage, arson is fire, and so on. Other crime is basically just left as a question mark. We don't know what it is. But yeah, we've got our icons set up now, and now onto the next part. And that part is going to be creating an associated color with each crime category also. So just below our icons, we'll create a little area here called crime colors. And again, like our icons above, we're just going to create a new object and we'll call this one colors. So our first color is going to be violent crime, the most serious, and that will be kind of like a bright red color. So instead of the fist emoji here, we'll pop in a value here that is red. So FF0000. And to save a bit of time, I'm going to fast forward again here and create all of the colors now. And we have our colors. Now, I didn't spend too much time creating these or thinking about them, but one does annoy me, or did annoy me, which now I think is funny, and that's antisocial behavior, to kind of indicate that this crime category is okay. Anyway, we'll leave it there. So we've got our icons and now we've got our colors. So we're basically at a point now we can actually create the map. So down here, I've just created this area called state, and we're going to create two variables. So the first is map, and the second is going to be an array called all fetched crime data, which we'll utilize in a following section. But now we need to create the map. So we're going to create a new function, and that's going to be called initMap. And this will be the main piece of the puzzle to actually initialize the Leaflet.js map. So I'll simply copy this comment here from state, and I'll just say it is map initialization. Okay, and now we can say function init map. And inside of this function, now we can actually begin utilizing Leaflet.js. So our very first line inside of this function is going to be creating an instance of the Leaflet.js map. So we're going to say map, which we've created earlier, equals L, capital L dot map. And then we're going to give it the ID of our crime map ID div. And then just set the initial view of the map, which is Greenwich Park. So longitude, latitude, and the initial zoom level. So l.map will be the ID of the map area. So that's config.map elements ID. Okay, the next one will be the location, or the longitude and latitude. So that's config.initial map center. And then we need the config. I think it's initial zoom level. Yeah. Okay, so we're good to go there. So currently we have an instance of our Leaflet.js map created. Now we just need to basically make it show up. And we can do that by using the property called tile layer. So capital L dot tile layer, parenthesis, and inside we already have this value in our config area. So it's config.map tile URL. And again, this just links to an OpenStreetMap. So we do need to add the attribution in as required, which is fine. So we'll add a comment in here and then add in some options. So we're just going to say attribution is config.map attribution. And then the last thing here we just need to do is to add it to the map. And we have this property called add to, and then we'll just add in our map. And it doesn't display. Okay, classic. Okay, let's investigate. I'm going to add a console.log message here just to see if it actually shows up. So console.log map created with config deets. And it doesn't show, which is, I guess, a good thing. Okay, so, I think I've spotted it. So instead of our console.log config created function, we just need to add in our init map. So let's remove this here now and add in our init map function. And there we go. Okay, so now we have a fully functional Leaflet.js map displaying on our website. Okay, and there's our console.log message. Okay, so kind of step one is just about done there. We're showing the map. Now let's move on to the next part. The next part is the most exciting because we're actually going to be fetching the data from the API. And again, I'm just going to add a little commented area in here so we know exactly what we're doing, and I'll just call it data fetching. And we'll create another function here to achieve this. So we'll say function, and we'll call this function fetch crime data. And inside, let's just create a little temporary console.log message just to see that everything is running okay. So with our message there, now we need to execute the function, and we're going to pop this into our init map function. So if we refresh the page, there we can see test. Okay, all working fine. We can get rid of this console.log message here now, and then we can actually begin pulling in some data. So let us declare a const variable for the API URL, and we'll just call it API URL. And in here, we're just going to say, with some template literals, we're going to pull in our base API URL. So just in here, config.base URL. Okay, so that will bring in the main API endpoint. Then let's add in the date parameter, which is just date. Yeah, so I'll say question mark date equals, and we've got it in our config area, config.initial month. And finally, for this API endpoint, we just need the latitude and longitude. So we already have these stored in an array in our config area. So the values will be initial map center 0 and initial map center 1. And if you're wondering why 0 is 1 and 1 is 2, basically JavaScript arrays are 0 index based. Anywho, so we have now our complete API URL. Let's output this to the console, and let's actually see it in action just to make sure everything is okay. So pop that in there. Let's go back here. So there is the API URL. Click that, and yeah, all of our data is pulling in. We can get rid of that console.log message now. So now, as before in the previous tutorial, we're going to start pulling in or fetching some data from this API endpoint. And we'll fetch the API URL. Then we'll just wait for the response and see if it's been successful or not. And I think first up, we just need to check if it's been unsuccessful. So we'll basically say if response is not okay, with the use of the exclamation mark, basically throw a new error. And we can even include the exact status code that it returned. And here, if it's been successful, we want to return the JSON. So we'll say return response.json. So with our JSON body available to us here now, we're going to add another then method. And we're going to include a data object in the parenthesis, because this is the data that was returned in the previous promise. Okay, so then down here, we need to actually add all the data, all of the body, to our array, which is all fetched crime data. And as always, as we're checking things along, let's create a new console.log statement. So we're going to say found data.length, how many rows were found, which is 737 crimes. And also we'll pull in all of the data as well. So we can see here, if we expand this here, it's clumped into rows of 100. So all of that data looks pretty good. Everything seems to be working just fine. And just to check things a little bit further, if we change the month here to the 6th, we can see there's actually 711 crimes. So this is working very beautifully indeed. And then the final thing we need to do in this fetch promise chain is to add a catch error. Okay, so I'll say catch any error that kind of happens in this process of pulling in some data or fetching the data. And we're going to say console.error, not log, maybe like error or fetch error. And then we can list the exact error, what happened, what occurred, just like that. Okay. So I think at this point, with all of the police crime data available to us, we should start kind of showing it on the map. Yeah, so I'm going to copy these comments up here, create a little area down here, and we'll just call it markers. Right. So I'm going to create a function here, and I'm going to call it just something like create simple markers. And this function is going to take data as a parameter. Inside of this create simple markers function, we're just going to loop through all of the data. So we'll say data dot for each, and we'll create a variable called crime. Okay, just like that. Now, before I go any further, I probably should add this create simple marker function above into our fetch crime data. So I think I'll pop it in here just below the console.log, and I'll pass in the data object as well. So that's good to go, just so I don't get any errors a bit later on. Okay, so let's continue. And let's first of all say console.log data. So that's being pulled in absolutely fine. Happy with that. Great stuff. And we will continue. So we can remove this console.log message. And here I'm just going to create another little check here. So as we're looping over each crime object, I basically just want to check that each object does have latitude and longitude values. So if a crime object doesn't have latitude or longitude, we can just skip it and move on to the next object. And you can see here I'm using optional chaining by the use of the question mark period. Right, so from this point, I think it's very important to note that the data being returned for longitude and latitude are actually strings. So you'll see what I mean here in the console. All of these latitude values are actually being returned as a string. So we need to convert these to numbers so Leaflet.js knows what to do with them. And we can do this very easily. We can say const lat equals parse float, and then basically include the value there. Get rid of that optional chaining. And now that has been converted to a number. So after the conversion, if we check the console now, type of lat, we will get a number. So Leaflet.js will know how to interpret it as a latitude. Now let's do the same here for the longitude. Just copy and paste that. Change lat to LNG, and over here we'll just change that property to longitude. So now we have numbers here instead of strings for the location. We can use this data now to actually pinpoint the marker on the map, but we need some other bits and pieces for it all to work together. So the category. So I'm going to declare a category called const category for the crime.category. I think that's correct. Just called category. Okay, so crime.category. And you know what? If there's none found, we'll just add a fallback and we'll say it's going to be other-crime instead. Next up, we need to declare a variable for the marker / emoji. So we're going to say const icon emoji equals, we're going to reference our previous object from earlier, which is just here. So that's just icons. So essentially, we're just trying to get the emoji from the icons object using the category as the key. So basically what we're saying here is if the icons object doesn't have a value for the given kind of category key, or the value is undefined, then we're going to use this question mark emoji instead. And we'll just pop that in there like so. Okay, so whoever is still watching, your patience is about to be paid off right now. Here, we're going to be adding the markers to the map. Now, before I show you our cool emoji icons on the map, I just want to show you what Leaflet.js provides. So if we say l.marker, we'll provide the latitude and longitude values, and then just say add to our map, we will see Leaflet.js pins all over. So not too bad looking, pretty nice in my opinion, but that's what you'd get if you didn't actually create your own icons. So with that said, let's move on and show the emojis on the map instead of these blue pins. So we can simply just remove this line here for each of these markers. And now we're going to create our own marker, our own custom marker. So we'll declare a marker icon here and we'll assign a value, capital L, our leaflet instance, and then say div icon, which is a method or a function to basically add some custom HTML. And the HTML is just going to be a standard div. So this div in effect is going to be the kind of marker. And inside of the div, we'll just basically call out the icon emoji, and just like that. Next up, we need another option called icon size. And just a quick note on this icon size option here. Now, this won't necessarily change the kind of height and width of our emoji. And this is more to tell Leaflet.js what area the icon is going to take up. So we're going to say it's going to be 32 by 32 pixels. And in conjunction with the icon size option, we need the icon anchor. And this is going to be half of the icon size. So it's going to be centered basically in the middle of the icon. Next up, I'm going to add a class name, just basically in case I want to add any extra CSS later on down the line. So I'll say emoji-marker. And I think now it's time to actually add the icons to the map. So we're going to declare a new variable just called marker. And we're going to use our leaflet instance, capital L dot marker, and then include the latitude and longitude values, followed by the most important piece, which is the marker. So I'll say icon is marker icon. And now we need to add it to the map. So add to, and then our map just like that. Yeah, it basically displays all of our icons, but they're a little bit too small, I think. So let's pop back in here to the HTML option. And we're basically just going to add in the font size here because it is an emoji. And we'll say, size there, font. There we go. Font size is 32 pixels and that looks much better. So there are our custom icons representing each crime category in their own respective locations. Now, I think it's pretty cool having all these custom crime category emojis on the map, but I think we need to make it a bit more interactive to make it useful. So down here, just below the icon emoji variable, I'm going to create a new variable called color. So if you remember, we've created a colors object above that basically lists the color associated with each crime category. Okay, so here we're going to say color equals colors category. And again, if there's none defined, we'll give it a fallback of a neutral gray, which is just 666. Right, so the next variable we need to create is the street's name. So we're going to say const street name equals crime.location.street. Street.name. But here we're going to use optional chaining again. So basically we're only going to grab name if street actually exists. And this is a nice way to make sure your app doesn't kind of crash if it doesn't find that value. And then if we don't find the value now with the optional chaining, we're going to give it a fallback of maybe unknown street. And street. Okay, so the next variable and the last variable I think we need to create at this moment is outcome. So what actually happens after the fact. So that's going to be crime.outcome_status. Yep, that's it, outcome_status. Okay, so pop that in there. And again, optional chaining, just in case it doesn't actually find it in the API call. And then we're going to say category, call that if outcome status is available. Otherwise, just give it a no outcome recorded value. And those are our main values that we need to show in our pop-up. So what we're going to do now is to actually create the pop-up code. And we do this by declaring another variable, and we'll call this something like pop-up, maybe HTML. And then basically we're just going to include all of these values in this pop-up area here. And the very first line in this area is going to be a strong tag. We'll include the emoji and eventually we'll include the category name. But for the moment, we're just going to include the icon emoji variable. And I think at this point, it'd be a good idea to actually test this pop-up functionality. So down below, let's go to our marker just here. So we've already got our marker kind of displaying, and now we need to bind this pop-up HTML to it. And then just before add to map, we're going to include another function, and we're going to say .bind pop-up, and yeah. And then inside of the parenthesis, we're going to say pop-up HTML, which we've just created there. So if we click on an icon now, we can see the emoji with a semicolon. So we can get rid of that. So yeah, all moving in the right direction. Right. Okay, so let's pop back into our pop-up HTML and let's give it a color for the category name, which we'll add in a moment. So we're going to say style color, and it's going to be the color above, just there. And now, let me see the emoji. Just beside the emoji, we're going to include the crime category. So just category like that. Now let's have a little peek on the map again. And let's click on this. So yeah, so car theft is blue. Fist violence is red, and so on. So that's working very nice. And just a small little niggle here, but if you see the violent crime category, if there's multiple words, it's kind of concatenated with a hyphen. I want to remove that just to make it look a bit more pretty. So let's do that now. So inside of our category variable here, I'm just going to append it with a .replace. And inside of these brackets here, I'm going to say, I want to remove the hyphen, so / hyphen / G, which is global, or it will remove all of the hyphens. And then basically just a space, so it'll be separated by a space instead. And then we just want to make it uppercase. So to uppercase, and let's have a look now. And I think that is much better. Yeah, all working fine. Okie dokie. So with our pop-up now, we just need to include the rest of the variables above. So now we can pop in the street name. And first I'm going to append each line with an emoji. So location, kind of emoji there, and then street name. We'll give it a line break. Next line is going to be the crime month. So crime dot month. Yeah, we need to give that an emoji as well. Yep. Okay, line break. And now let's give it, I don't know, like a date. So date emoji. Yeah, that looks fine. And the very last variable we need to include is the outcome. I won't say too much about that, but basically it seems that a lot of crime goes unresolved. Yeah. Anyway, you'll see what I mean in a moment. So let's say, let's include our outcome variable. Yep. So if we have a look here, yeah, no outcome recorded. That's quite a similar kind of theme. It's usually something like that, or couldn't prosecute, was unable to identify suspect, blah, blah, blah. It's quite depressing, actually. But anyway, moving swiftly on. Right, we just need to add the emoji for outcome. And I think that's just there, the scales of justice. Alrighty, and breathe. We've packed in a lot today in our little map, and we've added interactivity, custom emojis, and all of the details that go with each crime in their respective locations. So I'm going to leave it there and pick it up in part 3. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you got value out of this, please do subscribe to the channel, and catch you guys in the next one.